Hey everybody, as I noted at the top of today's lecture is entirely about one concept, and that concept is the rhetorical situation. I'm going to ask everybody in this week's discussion prompt on our Writing About Rhetoric discussion prompt on Oaks to apply this concept of the rhetorical situation to a speech, but let's go ahead and demonstrate how that's done right now. The speech I'm picking is among the most famous speeches in American history. It's a political speech given in 1968. It was also an impromptu speech in the sense that it wasn't planned at all. The context is incredibly tragic. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee in early April of 1968. Now, one of the weird things, aside from the tragedy, one of the weird things is that it was during a presidential campaign. The sitting president, Lyndon Johnson, who had won a landslide election against Barry Goldwater in 1964 after John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, had decided not to run again. He was no longer going to seek the nomination of his party, the Democratic Party, and he was no longer going to seek the presidency. And so it was a wide open race. And one of the main contenders who was mobilizing the Obama coalition, an early version of the Obama coalition, people of color, young people, poor people, and college students, was Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy's campaign was flagging, however. He wasn't doing very well in the polls. He was seeking a new political identity. In other words, he hadn't gotten off to a right start, but he still had incredible name recognition, and he still had somewhat of a devoted following. That night, the night that King was killed, Kennedy was scheduled to give a speech, a campaign speech, a rah-rah speech, a pep rally speech for his campaign in Indianapolis. And he finds out on a plane from Ohio into Indianapolis that Martin Luther King has been killed. He has to make a decision in the moment. Does he give the audience the bad news? News traveled much slower at the time, so nobody in the crowd was likely to have known. It just happened a few hours before. Does he give them the bad news and spoil his rally? Does he change his speech? How does he integrate this bad news, this tragedy, into his speech? And the result is one of the most famous instances of ethical communication and audience adaptation in American history. Let's watch it now.